without further ado, I say we just get right the heck into it. Now, on our previous pod, we introduced a new, fresh segment that I thought was absolutely glorious. So major kudos to you. That segment is one thing that you'd change about a comic book character. And it's pretty simple. Just as the name would suggest, we pick two comic book characters. We're going to pick one from the DC side, one from the Marvel side. We're going to provide to you, dear listener, our opinion on, hey, here's what we would change about that character to make them better. So not just to F with them, not just to mess and cause chaos into the world. No. We are seeking to improve these characters. So, today's candidates. On the Marvel side, we have Iron Man. On the DC side, we have The Flash. Let's start on the Marvel side with Iron Man, Tony Stark. Riley, you go first. What would you change? One thing.
So for Iron Man,
Yes.
I feel like we get really repetitive with Tony.
Mhm.
He gets rich, and then all his weapons get stolen, and he loses all his money, and then he gets it all back, and then he loses it all again.
You understand why he takes to the drink. That's a very
Correct.
extreme swing from one end of the pendulum to the other.
Yes.
Yep.
So my whole thing with Tony, I just want to see them get creative with him.
Mhm.
I feel like his creativity as of late, like, for instance, there is a couple of armors I can think of that allow him to do different things, right?
Yes.
You have the
Yes.
superior Iron Man
Correct.
costume
Yep.
or suit or whatever.
Yep.
And that kind of was adaptable to a bunch of different things.
Mhm.
And there was also, I believe it is either the Mark 50 or the Mark 80 in the comics. And the whole idea is that was all of his armors rolled into one, and it could do a bunch of different things as
Okay.
well. So I would like to see that creativity come into play where when you see his arm, I want to see his armor slowly progress.
Yep.
Throughout. I feel like we haven't had that lately. I feel like it's always kind of the same red and yellow. Don't get me wrong. It's great. It's a classic look.
It is a
But
good
I would
look.
like
Yep.
to see him evolve in that aspect. And I also thought that would make Iron Man more interesting of character is if he was the tinkerer for superheroes.
Mm.
So
Mhm.
I would like to see him take his weapon expertise
Yep.
and actually help build the superheroes,
Right.
essentially. So outfitting Captain America with more tech, or
He can use it.
Hawkeye with more, like, how cool would it be if he had like a goggle that would allow him to like scope
Right.
in and see things?
If Tony Stark is the supplier of Hawkeye's arrows, right? That just makes too much sense because there's already tech involved with Hawkeye's arrows. So doesn't it make sense that he would be collaborating with Tony Stark on designs? Like Hawkeye comes to Tony with a concept, Tony provides his own little Stark flavoring, and then bam, you got a quiver full of death.
Right. And I think people have always made that critique of why does Iron Man not just give everybody an Iron Man armor?
Yep.
Why not at least give them tech that helps them increase in their, like, not necessarily turn them into an Iron Man armor,
Sure.
but allow them to, it's pretty much just an enhancement of their abilities already, right? Maybe
Right.
on the, yeah. So that's where I'm at with it. I would like to see
No,
Tony
totally agree.
evolve in that. And then imagine if his tech gets, you know, taken over by somebody else in that aspect. Now it doesn't only affect just Tony.
Right.
It affects the entire Avengers.
Right.
Every superhero is affected in it some way or another.
Mhm.
So I would just like to see Tony's involvement. It kind of goes back to last week where I was like, oh,
Yes.
Parker evolving into this tech company,
Yep.
being able to partner with Iron Man or Mr. Fantastic or whoever has that money. So I'd like to see that aspect of Iron Man where we actually see the philanthropist side of him.
Oh, no doubt. No doubt. I love that take because it is when you pause and you don't take for granted the fact that Tony Stark is the dude in the Iron Man suit. You realize, well, wait a minute. This is an extraordinarily creative person. And so you would think it would get rather dull to take the same basic framework and simply iterate and iterate and iterate and iterate into the 80s and
Right.
beyond when it comes to versions of the suit. I'm not saying that can't be part of it, right? Like it's the original project in a certain respect, but by no means should that be his only area of interest. And we saw a little bit of that in the Marvel movies, but I think where the Marvel movies actually strayed too far is they went full suit. So Iron Man gives Spider-Man a full suit. And what I like with your idea is no, not like the full head to toe, like an Iron Man version of a suit for a Captain America or fill in any of the other characters' names, but enhancements. The Tinkerer is such a great example of what that involvement could look like, where it's outfitting and enhancing is probably the key word there. But what a great natural outlet for his creativity as a character. And to your point, it raises the stakes in terms of, hey, if Stark Tech gets compromised like it did in Secret Invasion, now the impact isn't just on Tony, but it carries across all heroes. And so I think there's some natural conflict that comes into play there of, hey, you got to make sure that, yes, the technology, like on the one hand, you're leveraging it, but you're not relying on it to the point that when it disappears, you've got no other counterpunch. And so I think that's absolute money.
Well, and if you think about it, what was the coolest part of Iron Man 3?
Yep.
What is the coolest part? The answer to that question is when he makes the house call and all the suits come in the final fight scene, and he's hopping through the different suits as he's taking on Pierce, who sucks. But, I mean, beautiful execution of that. Correct. And how awesome would have it been to be able, because, in the first movie up to Avengers, you kind of see him make those mods and increase. Well, Iron Man, or Avengers 2, that Iron Man 3 movie, he's got at least 30 different suits in between all of that that we don't actually get to see. And some of those that you even get a glimpse of, you're like, what made him build that? I want to see that evolution. And, it's the same way with Spider-Man, how he kind of developed different suits for different villains at one point or another. Correct. I want to see that, but then him be able to build off of that into the next suit and still incorporate everything that he's put into it.
Yeah, there is no doubt. There is no doubt. That's a great take. All right, I love that. On my side, when it comes to Iron Man, he has forever been a character in the comics where stale is the right word for it. And it's a shame because he's a very colorful character, right? Like his alter ego personality of Tony Stark is about as entertaining as it gets. And so it feels a bit odd that when it comes to the comics that Tony or Iron Man has a hard time, frankly, carrying a compelling, like, individual line. Here's what I think might be missing. Give Tony Stark, give Iron Man sidekick. And not an adult sidekick, give him a teenage sidekick. Because he's a disaster as a parent. And so it creates wonderful opportunities for conflict and disaster opportunities where Tony creates a problem and now has to, what's that? Fix the problem. And by all means, like make it a, here's my perfect picture of what a Tony Stark Iron Man sidekick would be. A teenage genius. So someone that at a young age already has the ability in some respects to outsmart Tony. Right? Because you know how Tony doesn't like being outsmarted, doesn't think he ever is outsmarted. When you pair him up with a teenage partner that on occasion does outwit him, it would make him furious, so aggravated. I am all for it. I think that would just bring out so much more of what's great about Tony Stark as a character. So colorful, so controversial at times. I think it would be perfect. I mean, it's really similar to why it's great when Batman and Bruce Wayne have sidekicks. Like, it brings out more of them than just in Bruce Wayne and Batman's case, the dark and brooding. It's like it brings out a bit of a more nurturing and caring side, right? And that's fun to see. The opposite of true with Iron Man, like he's already wildly outgoing, loves being around people, now just kind of reins him in a bit. from his eccentricities. So that's my take. I'd love to see Iron Man with a sidekick.
I feel like Ironheart could really do that.
Sure.
And it's a shame that, Tony's dead in the MCU, but
Right.
I know, like, when she was first introduced, Tony was technically dead as well. But, like, his AI helped her out quite a bit. So,
Right.
and I don't know if she's still a teenager or not, or what age she is, but she was on the Young Avengers. So,
Yep.
that would be interesting as well.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Mm-hmm.
because I feel like she as a character as well could use that
Yeah.
boost, and I think Iron Man would be the obvious choice there.
Question: like, since we potted most recently, I was rereading some of Matt Fraction's Iron Man run, and it's genuinely fantastic. The problem with Iron Man, and I mentioned Batman as a comparison, there are almost countless worthwhile Batman stories that you can read across multiple authors, different decades even. It's really pretty impressive, and well, it's why Batman is such the world-renowned character that he is. Whereas with Iron Man, like, he relies so much on the characters that he is around in order to have a good comic book story. When it's just Tony Stark, or when it's mostly Tony Stark as Iron Man, he's like a magnet where he needs to have other metals around him that he can pull in and impact, and vice versa, that can impact him. So the more intentionally that you can force him to be around another character, I think would just do absolute wonders for his character in the comics. And again, just like with Batman, it doesn't have to be all the time. Robin's not with Batman always, but it should be at least half the time. I think it would just make for some wildly entertaining comic opportunities. So that's my take.